ocean thermal energy conversion is a just another method. It's kind of like geothermal, which uses the thermal energy of the earth. This is ocean thermal. It uses the thermal energy of the ocean. So at the tropics, the sun, is dead on, right? Striking it all day, every day. It warms up the water at the surface. And the natural flow of deep water is such that it's, at about 800 to 1,000 meters below the surface, it's freezing cold, 4 degrees Celsius. And so anytime you have a difference in temperature, you can extract energy from that. You have a warm source, a source of heat, and a sink for that energy, for that heat.
But how? How does it?
So it's a Rankin cycle. You use a working fluid. In our case, we use a binary fluid of a combination of water and ammonia. And so, ammonia boils with the warm surface water. And then as it boils, it turns into a gas and vapor and flows through a turbine. And then you use that freezing cold water to condense it back to a liquid. And just run it. Big old loop.
Okay.
It's the original engine. It's the engine technology's been around since the beginning, and this OTEC is 141 years old.
So why is it not being used?
So the first plant was built in the 1930s in Cuba, and the 1930s was not a great time for renewable energy. The discovery of oil in the Middle East kind of put the kibosh on a lot of renewable energy projects. So it was kind of shelved for a while. And then, Hawaii came back. We have this list of all the different plants there have been about 14 different plants built over the last 100 years. The first one in Cuba, and then there've been 3 or 4 built in Hawaii, but they've all been on the small research end. And this tech, it's the most basic it's plumbing. It's not rocket science. It's not like nuclear energy. It's just a series of tubes. It's literally just a series of tubes.
But you've got to go out into the ocean and do it.
So it can be done on land. There's two options: a land-based, but once you start getting into the large scale, it really makes the most sense to do this on the ocean, on a platform, an offshore platform.
So it's a floating plant.
It's a floating plant ship. So if I say plant, I'm referring to a plant ship rather than what you think of on land as a plant.
And why can that generate so much energy?
The ocean is very big, and that's a lot of surface area for it's a solar powered.
So you have to build so the size of the plant will reflect how much energy you want to extract. Right.
It's proportional to how much water you take up. So, think of a 100 megawatt plant, which could power 100,000, 150,000 homes, is going to be about the size of, since we're all everybody after the Panama Canal disaster, we're all familiar with ship sizes now. It's about that size. That 100 megawatt is about the size of the ship that crashed in the Panama Canal.
And then, so how do you get that energy from...
the Suez Canal.
Yes. How do you get that energy from there to land?
So for the last 100 years, there have been sort of 2 ways that have been thought of to do this. There is the direct cable connection, right? High voltage cable. Something like this in Hawaii would be about 10 kilometers off the coast. So you have a 10-kilometer long cable. The other option is a grazing option, where it's with a connected plant, you have to have a mooring to keep it in place, right? You can't have it floating around because it doesn't really need to touch the bottom of the ocean, right? It's basically just a big straw to 1,000 foot. It's a big straw. It's a 30-foot diameter straw. It's a big fucking straw, but it's a straw nonetheless. So you have the connected version with a mooring, and then the grazing option is just a free-floating platform that you use to it's called Lockheed coined the term energy carrier plant, where they would produce, ammonia on board or, hydrogen that could be transported anywhere, right? So you do this in the middle of the ocean. You're cutting CapEx. You don't need the mooring, which deep water moorings take forever to get. That cable is expensive. And you have all this extra overhead of being on land and being close to land. So the grazing option is cheaper.
I still don't understand it. So you generate the energy.
Yep.
Are you storing it and then sailing it back to the
So
island?
in the grazing option, or not the grazing, in the energy carrier, you use that energy to generate green, hydrogen fuel, and then you convert that to ammonia by the Haber-Bosch process. And then you take that, then a ship comes by, takes that ammonia to wherever it's needed, and then you can use that as fuel somewhere else.
And what fuel do you use that? Can you use that to generate
energy? Yeah.
Energy. How do you use ammonia to generate energy?
Well, you turn it back to hydrogen.
And then how do you turn hydrogen to energy?
Fuel cell, the hydrogen cars. That's one of the big pushes.
But how advanced is the hydrogen tech fuel cells to generate?
Not very.
Yeah. So
this was theoretical.
Okay.
This was purely theoretical at the time.
I'm going to ask something, but I think I know the answer. Is the answer to this in Bitcoin? Because it goes back to Saylor's point. So if you go out there, if you take a bunch of ASICs, you can mine Bitcoin.
Yep.
You can send that Bitcoin.
Transport it back to land. Well,
you don't have to transport it.
You don't have to. It's already there, right? You
Yeah.
just stick the address, the address in the block.
And then how do you convert that Bitcoin into then energy?
Oh, you don't.
You don't.
You convert it into financial capital.
Right.
And so the problem...
But that doesn't solve the energy. This is great for Bitcoin mining, but it doesn't solve the need for renewable energy.
So the problem with OTEC is not a technological problem. It's very simple. Again, it's not rocket science. It's plumbing.
Yeah.
And the problem is not, at scale, 100 megawatt, 400 megawatt plant sizes. Those are connected to land because the cable and the mooring make up a very small portion of the budget. The problem is that all of the research that's been done and all the plants that have been built are on the small scale. And so scaling this technology from 100 kilowatts, which is the size of the plant built on this last plant built on the Big Island of Hawaii, to 400 megawatts, you can't go straight. You need to build somewhere in the middle, right? You need to build a pilot plant that's, of sufficient scale to prove that it works at large scale.
Okay, I get it.
And so the problem with this 10 megawatt plant has been, well, if you hook it up to land, that cable, that mooring make up an outsized portion of the budget. And so what happens is once you start adding that cable in and the mooring and the 10 years worth of cost, you end up with a LCOE, cost of energy, being around 50 cents per kilowatt hour. And we pay in Hawaii 44 cents per kilowatt hour. And so even at our current cost of energy, that's still too high, especially for something that you would need to pay for 30 years. Now, with the grazing option, you cut all this CapEx, you can stand it up faster, but before Bitcoin, there was never a way to make money in the middle of the ocean. These 10 megawatt size isn't necessarily for the energy, it's more for the technology. And
I get it. Ding, ding, ding. You take a bunch of miners out there, a bunch of ASICs.
Yep.
And that is going to reduce the cost for you to build your proof of concept. And once you've built the proof of concept, you can expand
the race.
Yeah.
The 10 megawatt plant size only needs to generate a single kilowatt hour of energy. That's it.
How many of these plants would you need to power all of Hawaii, all the islands?
It would end up being about 6.
6 would power all the islands.
Oahu is about 6. You add in another one per island because the other islands generally. So on Oahu, we take it's about 2,000 megawatts of energy, and then the other islands have about 200 megawatts each.
So where are you at with this? When you actually have you started construction?
So we are. Our plan right now is to take over the 100 megawatt. Our partners are Mackay Ocean Engineering, who built and constructed that 100 kilowatt plant on the Big Island. So we need to, and so what's nice about Bitcoin and OTEC is that it's not just the energy part, right? That's kind of been the MO of Bitcoin miners for the last, you take the miners, you put them in a container, you co-locate that container next to an energy source. Well, our plan isn't to just co-locate these things next to, it's to actually integrate those Bitcoin miners into the energy generation process in a full cycle integration, or something I call the Harmon cycle. And it's, because it's that delta T of the OTEC cycle is so low, right? You can get in the water. It happens to have a lot of overlap with the heat output of these Bitcoin miners. So what you can do in this full cycle integration, you can generate the energy with the OTEC cycle, put that energy into the Bitcoin miners, reuse that heat to stick back into the OTEC cycle to improve its efficiency, and then you can cool the work. It has to be done with an immersion fluid, and then you can subcool the immersion fluid with an infinite supply of freezing cold water. So you get the cold, you get the cooling for free, and the energy, and it, including Bitcoin, makes it more efficient.
Yeah.
You can't do it any other way.
It's fucking genius.